This is the PressBox High School Football Show with Booker Corrigan and legendary former McDonough coach Dom Damico. The guys look over everything going on in the world of high school football, both at the private school and public school level. Now, here's Booker Corrigan.
Hey now! What a great weekend, some great high school football. We're going to touch on some events that happened up in Elkton, Dom, and I know that you feel very strongly about that. And it was a very touching moment sometimes when you're tested with tragedy, you rise to the occasion, and Elkton obviously did. We're going to review the games that happened. We're going to preview some big ones, including a little teaser for that big St. Francis IMG game that's coming up a week from now. And we're also going to continue our recruiting conversation after the break, which is absolutely fantastic. I want to let you know we are coming to you from the live casino hotel studio thanks to Wise Markets, Glen Burnie Transmissions, and the U.S. Army, along with the Baltimore Running Festival, October 19th. And I have you signed up for a run.
I worked out all weekend, brother. Ready to go. I did at least 10 push-ups and 3 sit-ups.
3 might be an exaggeration, but you got to get out of bed twice. So there's 2. We had the .05K on Thursday night. Okay. .05. It's like 85 feet. That's how you've hit a putt longer than that.
I can handle that.
Yeah, .05K. So we're going to get you signed up. We're going to get Luke Jackson signed up for that too. You're in for the .05K. That's Thursday, and then the Belcara Health 5K. We think you can do that. We got high hopes for you. Go to thebaltimoremarathon.com and sign up now. It's going to be amazing. But we're glad you're part of the show.
Thank you, sir.
Now, let's get right into the events at Elkton, because what really went on and how strongly people now feel about a great program. Take us through it.
Yeah, really sad situation up in Elkton. One of the assistant coaches, Coach Brown, suddenly passed away. Coach Brown has a son on the team named Ian, who was a defensive starter. And, it was just a real emotional situation up there, having to, deal with that. And at the same time, the team that they were playing actually beat them the previous year, knocked them out of the state championship in the semi. So they had the emotion of, as a revenge game against Oakdale from Frederick County. They had the passing of a coach who I've never met, Coach Brown, but everything that I read about him was phenomenal. He was a great person, a great guy, a great coach, was always there when kids needed him. And, he's just the kind of guy you want around high school kids that's just going to do everything. You and I talk all the time about a coach's number one job, especially in high school and lower level. It's not to win games. Your number one job is to find a way to get every individual to become the best possible version of themselves and get that team collectively to become the best version of itself. And Coach Brown certainly sounds like one of those guys that the kids went to. And then you add on that emotional factor of you're playing the team that knocked you out of the state playoffs the year before, and they rose to the occasion. Yeah, no doubt. And the school got behind it. The booster club bought stickers to put on the kids' helmets from Elkton, and they dedicated the season to the coach. And my condolences to his family, to the whole Elkton program. I'm sure they're very happy that they won the game. They're looking to definitely try to win the state championship this year to honor Coach Brown. So it'll be exciting to follow that.
And it's tough to put kids in that position where they have to be emotionally available for their teammate, because he had a son on the team. It really does. High school kids can surprise you sometimes with their compassion. And a great coach like Coach Brown certainly helps those kids tap into that when they need to.
Yeah, and resiliency too.
Yep.
It's a really a difficult situation. And the last thing really I want to express is that almost all the adults at the Elkton football program talked about that Coach Brown found the positive in every kid. And, everyone needs someone on the staff to do that. So kids are making mistakes on and off the field all the time, and coaches are there to kind of correct them and help them. And you need a guy like Coach Brown there to do those kind of things. So congratulations to Elkton and condolences to Coach Brown's family.
It certainly does help you realize, what's important in life and what we can do as coaches to help kids get through some adversity, because they're going to face it no matter what. So it's an interesting turn of events. I'm certainly thrilled for Elkton that they were able to pull out the win for no other reason other than, it just certainly puts a stamp of, hey, great job.
No doubt.
Let's look at some other games. You might notice I'm wearing my orange pants today because I had a little side bet with a friend of mine on the McDonough-Calvert Hall game, and I was going to wear the colors of the team that won the game. McDonough certainly did a nice job against Calvert Hall, huh?
They did. McDonough's got a very good football team. They won 28-8 over Calvert Hall. Preston Howard, their quarterback right now, is a sophomore, 6'5", 220-pound kid. Great runner, great thrower. He will be the next blue-chip quarterback in the state of Maryland. He might be one of the best quarterbacks right now in the state as a sophomore, but he had a big game, big over-the-top throws, 75-yard runs. He commands the offense. He's difficult to bring down. So he has the entire package. I taught him in my last year teaching at McDonough. He was in my PE class, and he would just stand under the basket, jump up with no run, and just dunk the ball with two hands. So he is an absolute stud athlete. He's a nice kid, and I'm really happy that all those good things are happening for Preston. The other kid at McDonough that's just dynamic, if you want to watch an old school linebacker, watch Jackson Bonnets play.
Oh yeah,
Jackson Bonnets will knock your head off. I mean, if you step on the field and Jackson Bonnets,
I don't want him to.
No, you really don't. If he's on the field and you're on the field, you have to make sure your mouthpiece is in and make sure your chin strap's tight.
All 4 points.
He is going to bring it. He is a tough kid. He doesn't know anything except full speed and full contact, and he's fun to watch. He's a great tackler, great competitor.
So let me ask this. How do you harness that as a coach? And you had players that went on to star at D1 and then go into the pros. How do you get them to dial that back in practice so that they're not, running kids to the training room?
It's tough. It's tough because he wants to do that all the time, and I've seen it when when I was coaching Jackson that he lays it to some kids on the scout team that probably aren't ready for that type of hitting.
Rudy Rudiger.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you do. It's definitely something as a coach you got to be leery of because Jackson's going to bring it, and you don't want to put that 14-year-old,
exactly
130-pound kid taking the brunt. And sometimes you miss on it and it happens, and you just look up and hopefully that kid's okay. But most of the kids have a good understanding of when to go 100% and when to go 80%. But sometimes Jackson's 80% is still too much. So.
Yes, I tell you what, sometimes my 80% wasn't enough. Isn't that shocking? My high school football career was played at 80%. That's why we have him here. It's not my show. It's his show. Let's talk about some of the other games that jumped out at you. Some reviews. I know you got a couple.
Yeah, a couple. Mount St. Joe big over, a rebuilding Gilman team. Gilman's kind of rebuilding right now with a new coach, and I know Coach Nick's spending a lot of time and doing a great job, but just overmatched right now. Mount St. Joe kind of big over them. Pilates stays for real in the B Conference, beats Curley. There goes to 6-1, so good things are happening down in Laurel for Pilates. South River High School, again, my old player Eddie Dolch is 6-0. He scored a whopping 65 points over Glen Burney. Glen Burney.
Yeah.
But the 65-0 win for South River was very impressive for Eddie. Westminster High School, we talked about that last week, and they were 2-2, off to a little bit of shaky start, but 40-0 over Man Valley.
Hung half of 80 on them.
The
Westminster Hoot Owls.
Pretty good. And then the final two games, Mervo, again, 35-0 over Edmondson. Kyle Nelson with 2 TDs on the ground. And what he was proud mostly of was how well his offensive line played. And his offensive line of Missouri, Gilliam, Berry, Mason, and Johnson dominated the line of scrimmage all game. And if Mervo continues to do that, any high school football team that has a strong offensive line is going to be a good football team on the offensive side of the ball.
That's true in the pros and college, too. Offensive line, the trenches. And a question I wanted to lead you into is, you did some run and shoot early in your career, and you stayed with that. Do you think that high school football might be getting back towards the ground attack, or do you think it's going to stay chuck and duck?
No, I think it's going to be a more of an RPO system where it's run pass option. I think that's where everyone's going. I think that all the way up into the NFL, the skill set of the quarterbacks in the NFL are changing, and they're fed by the colleges, which has already changed, and it's already migrated down into the high school. So the pocket passer Bobby Sablehouse is gone. I think, you're going to see a different breed of football all the way from rec football through the pro football, where you have a dynamic quarterback who really, and if you really want to talk X's and O football, when you do that, it makes the game 11 on 11 instead of 11 on 10, and it gives the defensive coordinator one more guy to worry about.
And you certainly see it in the pro level, too, with my man Russ, although those uniforms were awful. Hey, we got to take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk about that recruiting conversation that we've been alluding, getting it in and out of every week. Coach Dom always has some insights there. And we're also going to talk about that Mervo offensive line as well.
Need groceries today but don't have time to shop? Order online with same-day pickup or delivery at Wise Markets. Wise to go online. Now that's convenient.
This is Stan the Fan for Glen Burnie Transmissions, located right in the heart of Glen Burnie for almost 60 years. If you suspect you're having a transmission problem, GBT can save you hundreds of dollars over taking it to the dealers for a repair. Make an appointment for a free diagnostic and estimate. Call GBT at 855-728-1841. Their mission is simple: to provide excellent service at a reasonable price. Go to their website at gbt-online.com to check out all of the 5-star reviews. Let my friend Mark Schwartzman and his GBT team take the troubles out of transmission troubles. Call them today at 855-728-1841.
Respect. It's more than a word. In the U.S. Army, it is one of our core values, earned through selfless service to our nation and making a difference both at home and abroad. On the Army team, respect is earned daily. And now, in addition to earning respect, you may earn up to $40,000 in bonuses if you qualify. To learn more, visit goarmy.com/bonus or call 1-800-USA-ARMY, paid for by the U.S. Army.
And we are back, coming to you from the live Casino Hotel studio. Huge thank you to Wise Markets, Glen Burnie Transmissions, and U.S. Army, as well as the Baltimore Running Festival. It's taking place on October 19th. I know we have some lacrosse people who double over. If you've been invited to that Under Armour Callback Academy, that is a can't-miss event. November 9th down in Richmond, Virginia. So make sure you check that out. Dom Damico, once again, my co-host. Coach, we've been having this recruiting conversation. We've taken parents and players through the middle school process. One of the things we talked about in preparing was middle school football is a great participation event. A lot of kids get to play the sport of football the one and only time that they're going to do that. Middle school happens and they are weeded out for one reason or another, and now you're getting into high school and you need to find out what position you can excel at, what position your team might need you, and how do you as the coach counsel the kid or evaluate the kid so that he's in the best position for him to help the team the most?
Well, a funny line that I usually do is walk up to kids and say, listen, you're either a blocker or a runner. Yeah. And that kind of separates them in half right there. Yep. And then, honestly, what I've always did, the first 3 days of practice, I basically let the kids, if they're confused about where to go, I let them go wherever they want. And then after 3 days of kind of an evaluation period, we kind of meet with them and tell them, hey, son, linebacker is not going to work for you. You're a little bit too slow. I think we're going to need you to move the defensive end. Or if you try out for receiver and you're dropping a bunch of balls, you might need to be a defensive back. So, I think that's kind of the process. It's a process of kind of evaluation, watching, giving kids a chance to go out there and live their dreams and say, hey, I really want to be a receiver, but sometimes it's not going to work out. The funny story of
3 days.
Well, 3 days. 3 days is pretty good for coaches that know what they're evaluating. In my situation in high school in 1978, I was a running back in rec football, go to Northeast Catholic High School, and the running back line, they separated groups. The running back line had 33 kids in it.
Oh.
And, 248 kids try out for freshman football. And I looked over to my left, and the quarterback line had 2 guys. One guy had a club foot, and the other guy had a broken right hand.
I was born with a club foot. So
I slithered out of that line.
You slithered out of the running back line of 35.
This is a true story. And I got into that line. And by the first game, I was the starting freshman quarterback and started for 3 years on the varsity after that. And, it was really just out of my common sense looking around and saying, I don't really want to be in a line with 33 running backs.
The common sense sometimes is a good common denominator to help people make the right decision. So you give them that time, and you also you let them see, because they're looking at the length of those lines also. Mm-hmm. And these days, I feel like a lot of kids want to get onto that varsity team as freshmen. How do you really differentiate between a kid who is going to it's going to behoove him to play freshman ball, or he's got to be up on the varsity?
Well, that's a tricky situation. Most of the freshmen that ever played for me or that I've ever seen play as true freshmen at high-level high school football end up being Division I football players. You know, Darius Jennings at Gilman's was an impact player as a freshman. Eric King had played in the NFL, was an impact player for me as a freshman. Darius Hayward Bay. So the guys that can step on the field right away and have that skill set as a freshman, they're going to go a pretty far way in football. There's no doubt.
Funny you mentioned Darius Jennings. I know he's a quarterback at Gilman who you had to coach against, and I apologize. We were broadcasting a game, and Gilman's best play. The best play they ran, they did it 4 times, and it wasn't intentional, was when they snapped the ball over his head. Because all the defensive players, and this wasn't against you guys,
right?
But all the defensive players, they look at the ball rolling on the ground, and they're like, and they lose their lanes. They don't understand what they're doing anymore because they're looking at the ball. And, of course, Darius would beat him to the ball, pick it up, and he would go for 60 yards. So snapping the ball over Darius Jennings, if it were over my head, I'm not even going for the ball. But if it were over Darius's head, it actually turns out to be a good play. How do you make sure that kid's going to be safe? Because Darius was not a big kid.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing. Most programs that have smaller numbers of kids on the team are more influenced in trying to get the freshmen to be on the varsity team. You know, bigger programs like Spalding, Calvert Hall, Mount St. Joe, some of the bigger Catholic schools, or even, you know, at Franklin right now, we have 0 freshmen on the team, but we have 80 kids try out for varsity football. So you'd have to be pretty special to make it. A lot of the smaller independent schools do have freshmen that try to play. I think the argument is, you know, are you going to get enough snaps in the varsity game to, validate you being on the team, practicing with the varsity and not getting game reps compared to getting every single rep on the JV. And that I think every one of those situations is unique, and you have to evaluate each one independently.
Unique and individual of itself. And you can't take a kid who's 5'10", 160 and say, go to Wise Markets and beef up on some stuff, and I'll see you back here when you're 220 next week, because it just doesn't – they're going to develop at their own rate.
No doubt.
So it's always good. And you are evaluating a school. We're still talking about that recruiting concept of how are you going to get your kid from rec ball, from small ball to college football. And that's where we're going to end at the end of the season. We're going to take your child all the way through. So now we've got him into where he's a high school football player. We're trying to decide on the right position for him and where he can contribute and what team he can contribute on. It's vital for parents to really measure that and trust the coach. I had a great conversation with a lacrosse parent, and I said, if your son comes to this school, I want him to play JV as a freshman, and I know that's going to be a tough pill to swallow, but that's where he is going to do the best. And like your story about you start for the freshman team and then you start on varsity from your sophomore through senior year, that's sometimes the best way to do it, but it doesn't mean you don't get to play varsity as a freshman.
Yeah, you know, an interesting situation I witnessed the other day at Franklin where a woman came in and I didn't know who she was or who her son was, and Coach Burgess and I were sitting there talking football, and she says, "Hey, sorry, I'd like to interrupt, and I wouldn't like to interrupt, but can I talk to you about my son? I'm not sure, is he going to play JV or varsity? You had him up for a week," and Burgess kind of gave her the lay of the land, and at the end of the conversation, she said, "You know what, Coach, you've been doing this for a long time. I trust you." And you know what? As a coach, that's what you want to hear.
Yep.
You really want to hear that. And there's sometimes you probably need to dig in a little bit more. If I was a parent and the guy's, it's his 3rd week coaching or it's his first year coaching, you might not say that. You might want to evaluate what he's doing, watch him, and continue to communicate. But a lot of coaches that have been doing it for 15, 20, 25 years, they generally have a good feel of what's the best interest of the kid, where the kid should be. And it was just a pleasure to hear a parent say, "Hey, Coach, you've been doing it for a long time, and I trust you," and that feels really good.
Note to parents, there's not a coach out there that got into the business to try and screw over your son or daughter. They're just doing it because they want to help your kid. Coaches and teachers get into the profession because they love helping young people become the best version of themselves. That's my public service announcement for the week. Now let's get to some upcoming games. We got some good ones, but we also have on the horizon is that IMG St. Francis. We're going to try and get Coach Poggi on the show to call in next week. But let's talk about some big ones coming up this week.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest game in the WCAC is going to be Good Counsel Gonzaga. Gonzaga is still undefeated, 6-0. Good Counsel 5-1. Big crowd. All these WCAC games are big, but again,
and those are top 20 teams.
Top 20 teams in the country. Gonzaga, really a well-coached football team. I think I played them maybe 5 or 6 times when I was the coach at McDonough. Always great games, came down to the last play or the last quarter. But again, a lot of people don't talk about Gonzaga. You hear more DeMatha, you hear Good Counsel, but Gonzaga is a really well put together program with a great student athlete base, and I wouldn't be surprised if Gonzaga doesn't win it all this year.
I had a chance to broadcast the game in the I-95 shootout that was at Towson, and Good Counsel was playing, and Stephon Diggs was on the Good Counsel team. I didn't have to learn a lot of other names.
No.
He had the ball on at least half the place. They're like,
that coach was smart enough to get him the ball.
Yeah. Tell you got a kid who's going to go play for the Vikings. You might as well get him the ball. Who else do you like?
Well, St. Mary's and Pilati. Again, Pilati continues to impress me, but again, I think this might be a preview game for for the B Conference Championship. Actually, with St. Mary's against Pilati. Old Mill and Arundel is going to play a game, which is going to have some significance in the county playoffs.
That's Anne Arundel County whiplash going down there.
Yes, sir. And then, John Carroll and Loyola. Interesting game because obviously Loyola's independent, been doing really well. John Carroll's, one of the top B Conference teams. So it'll be interesting to see where Loyola kind of fits in with the top level B Conference teams.
And also, I think you have Hartford Tech?
There is. Hartford Tech against Patterson Mill, both teams undefeated, so one of those teams is going to be remaining undefeated almost halfway into the season. And then Pennsgrove versus Linganore. I haven't talked about Linganore a whole lot, but Linganore is always one of the top teams in the state, and they're both 5-0. So, the 2 5-0 teams going at it. Linganore, always a successful football seasons.
And the other thing, as a high school coach, you have 2 teams who are going in there undefeated. One's going to take a loss. How do you help them understand that, this is not a playoff game? Yes, we did just lose our undefeated record, but we still have something to build on. Sometimes that can be an advantage for a team to take a mid-season loss because you're good, but you also know you just took one on the chin. You can build from there.
Yeah, especially now since the Maryland Public School playoff system has invited 32 teams in each division. So you're almost going to be guaranteed, if you're one of the top 32 teams in 1A, 2A, 3 or 4A, to get into the playoffs. So those losses aren't as significant if they're only taking 16 teams. And, in the MIAA, the old days without the playoffs, you lose one game, you're done. You're basically playing the next 3 to finish either second, third, or fourth. So, yeah, I think the public school system now, the MIAA does have a playoff system, which helps early losses, and you can redeem yourself. But the public school system, you can lose a few games, get enough points, make the playoffs, and continue your seasons.
Huge thank you to our friends at Wise Markets, Glen Burnie Transmissions, and the U.S. Army. Absolutely fantastic to have sponsors. And, of course, the Baltimore Running Festival. Coach Damico will be doing the Belcara Health 5K, as well as the 98 Rock .05K. We got money on you winning that, maybe. It's .05 Ks.
Double down.
You've made putts longer than this race.
No doubt.
For Coach Damico, my man Luke Jackson, I'm Booker Corrigan, reminding you only get one shot at today.